But you can hear me now, correct? Yeah. Okay. So the last thing I want to do is keep anyone past time. And I can appreciate that we've had a lot of interesting ideas. We've had a lot of opportunity to think about curriculum, think about assessments, and think about what school is all about. There's a lot of intellectual stimulation that's already happened, and so I'm going to try to be brief, but also try to share a few things. And Emma, I just had to share this with you. I don't know if you ever saw this, but we actually got a Disney cartoonist to help us with our little logo, and someday I want to make T-shirts. But anyway, so that's Twistery. That was a different time. So I want to just share a little bit about open assessments as an enabler to competency-based education. For those of you who don't know me, I've been involved with open education for quite some time. Did a lot of my graduate work in open education and with David Wiley, and still have a very a fondness for open education. And so this was an opportunity to get back into it a bit. In the last several years, I've been at Western Governors University, which is if you're not familiar with it, it's one of the first, actually the first, competency-based institution, completely online and very much a go at your own pace sort of an institution, designed very much to be different in the sense that it was built from scratch to break some of the rules, including the rule of time. So one of the things I wanted to start with, though, is just this idea that, and we've been talking about it, just getting out of our breaking the mold and getting out of some of the breaking free of some of the conventions that we're sort of bounded by, and so it's always good to think about the alternative. You know, we can just slowly decline into obsolescence, and somehow that motivates me. So I wanted to just share for 2 minutes a brief little clip about competency-based education, and really the idea of competency-based education. I'll keep it very, very brief, but it's really about measuring learning rather than time. And once you can sort of break the mold of time, and everything being time-based and everything being focused around credit hours and sitting in a chair for this much time, this many weeks, some really interesting possibilities open up, and that's really the sort of one of the foundational premises of competency-based education. So let's see if I can. I'm not going to be very patient with this video. If it plays, and if not, I'll just explain it. Let's see here.
Talk a little bit about measuring learning, or in the more sort of quantifiable, concrete term that we use, because learning is a very amorphous thing to measure, measuring competency.
Sure. So, there's a saying that if you're measuring seat time rather than learning, you're measuring the wrong end of the student. And I think there's a certain way in which that's true, because we continue to talk about time sort of relentlessly. And the thing about time is that if you have that as the measure, it's the thing you're holding standard, but you're letting learning be sort of undefined and sort of squishy, right? So competency-based education tries to reverse that. So it says we're going to be very specific about what we expect to see, what we want our graduates to know and be able to do, but the time is really irrelevant. So one of the cornerstones of competency-based education is that it is essentially time agnostic. It could be self-paced, it could be self-paced within a 6-month term, but it's not what the focus is. I would say the second focus, which is really closely related to the question of making time flexible, is that what matters is mastery, sort of rather than grades. And by mastery, I mean you have a certain bar which you've defined clearly, and students can take make numerous attempts to get there, but you don't have people sliding through with a C- as you can in a school or two, I've heard. So that notion of mastery, as opposed to grades, of course, requires a third thing, which is really defining clearly what those expectations of students are. So at College for America, which, as Libby said, is a private, not-for-profit school, which is located in New Hampshire, but our school is actually online, so it could, in fact, be located anywhere. We've tried to tackle some of those other problems, which I think in some ways are related to the credit hour. We're radically affordable in the sense that it costs $2,500 a year, all inclusive. And when you think about that, that means that you could get a BA, for instance, for $10,000, which is a little bit startling, right? And one of the things we're doing to address some of the other issues that were mentioned is that we're working closely with employers.
Okay, so I'll just stop there. That's 2 minutes. So a couple of things that I wanted to pull out from that little clip is the idea of competency-based education is really about, it's about flipping the model of, so much of what when we think about grades, and I thought there was, I really appreciated the historical background that was given on grades at the beginning of the seminar. When we think about grades and why we have grades because time runs out. Time runs out because we're all focused on time and we all go at the same pace, and then time runs out, and you get an A and I get a C because I'm slow, and so that's sort of the traditional model. Well, it doesn't have to be that way, and so really competency-based education at its core, and there's a lot of other things we can sort of attach to it, but it's really about awarding academic credit based on mastery of some clearly defined competencies, some clearly defined outcomes. And so, again, you've got this idea of de-emphasizing time, emphasizing mastery. Assessments play a role, but I'll just be careful to say that it's really about authentic assessment, right? So it's designing the course to prepare you to be able to do something, and so you're building the learning with the end in mind. And so if you have, so your assessment could be, if you're in a business course, your assessment could be writing a business plan. And so the other piece on assessments that's very important for competency-based, because you have to imagine everyone's going at a different pace, so now you have to really leverage technology to make that work. And that's the reason why competency-based is interesting now. It existed a long time ago. Probably a lot of you sitting in the room are thinking to yourselves, what's the big deal? We've heard about competency-based. It's, they were talking about it 20, 30 years ago. The reason it's significant now is because now we have the ability to allow students to go at different paces and to still be able to interact and to have essential interactions with mentors, with faculty, with teachers. But it's the technology that enables keeping track of where a student is struggling and allowing them to do as much as they can and then go to their mentor and ask for help. It's a bit like Amazon. Amazon works really well for me because I don't have to talk to anyone most of the time. And that's brilliant. I've bought things as I was backing out of my driveway on my phone, and they make it so easy that it's a bit scary. But when I do need help, there's someone I can call, and I can get help quickly, and I can understand their accent, and it's actually it's quite a good system. So they get out of the way when I don't need to talk to someone. I don't need someone to show me a product. I can read the reviews. I can serve myself most of the time. And that's how this can be also affordable while also being very, while serving students better than the traditional model. Also, I want to say I'm not suggesting that everything should be competency-based. This is just for adult learners especially. This is something that really can, it just allows for a different population to be served that otherwise might not be served. It's the way I look at it, it's a bit like online education 2.0. I'm not impressed with online education. I think that for the most part, we just took the physical classroom and we tried to copy it online, and we did a terrible job. I mean, but we have to forgive ourselves, right? Because that's what they did with theater as well. Moving pictures, right? The first thing that happened when they got the movie camera was they put it on a tripod and they filmed the play. It's okay as a first attempt, and then pretty soon they realized that they could cut and splice the film and do some interesting things, and even mount the camera on a crane, on an arm, put it on a helicopter eventually. But you know, and then there's green screens, and it just goes on and on. So the technology has to start somewhere, right? So we can sort of forgive ourselves for just copying the classroom, but it can't stop there. It gets interesting now, and a lot of the general public is judging us for the first attempt at online learning. Well, we have to do better. So this is, in a sense, this is taking advantage of all the affordances of technology, where I think online learning was more just about just making a carbon copy of the classroom, and essentially we ended up with a learning environment with sort of both arms tied behind our back. We just really had a lot of disadvantages and no advantages. So there are advantages to a technology-enabled learning environment. We just have to find them. So individualized support for learners, I'm going to just go through this quickly, but and then this part, I think, is what's critical. It's more flexible and more responsibility is on the learner, and therefore there's something motivating about taking charge of your own learning experience. And that's not to say that you're just good luck. You know, it's not. Again, I don't want to compare it to online learning because I think a lot of mistakes were made and it was just good luck and either come back when you're done or let us know when you drop out. So who's doing competency-based education? And this is something that I was surprised to see that more than 200 institutions are already doing it. So it's not something that was, you know, is just being tinkered with by one or two institutions. This is just a sampling of who's doing it right now. Emma, do I have 10 more minutes? Is that... If you just start getting up and leaving, then I'll know that it's time to be done. So if we can make learning the new constant and make time the variable, then really every student can succeed. And it's just as simple as that. Now, if we have a situation where okay, well, let me explain. Part of what I do is I left Western Governors University because I had an opportunity there to help a few other institutions, community colleges, through a Gates grant to think about competency-based education. Well, it was only 10% of my time, but it was my favorite thing to do. So I had an opportunity to do that full-time, and that's what I do now with Helix Education, which is a consulting company. And so I help institutions think about competency-based education and what it can possibly do for them. There are accreditation issues, and everything is tied to the credit hour. So believe me, once you blow that up, everything blows up. It all falls down. So, which is great, actually, if you're into blowing things up. So the key roles within competency-based education, and I won't even go into them, but essentially it's very similar. The faculty don't go away. The faculty are still involved with curriculum development. But they are involved more as a guide or a mentor when it comes to the direct instruction. It's really never made sense to me why a well-paid professor would stand in front of the classroom and just deliver the same lecture over and over again and tell the same jokes. Those professors, I think, they could spend, the time could be better spent having one-on-one interactions with students. And so that's really where the time shifts. When every student is at a different place in the course, then basically every interaction is a one-on-one interaction. And so there's a lot of mentoring and coaching that happens. But then also technology has a role. So now let me shift gears quickly, because this presentation was about open assessments, so I should probably talk about that. But open assessments in the service of competency-based education. So when you think about OER, you probably can imagine a wide variety of resources: videos, lectures, open textbooks, and just generally web pages that have open licenses, right? Assessments is not usually one of the things that you think about, and probably because everyone's very guarded about their assessments, right? My assessment is something that, I don't want it to get out, because then people could cheat, and we wouldn't want people to actually, see ahead of time what they're going to be assessed. And anyway, it goes on and on. So let me just say at the outset that this project is all about assessments in a formative sense. So if you focus on the formative, then there's nothing wrong with sharing your assessment, right? Because those assessments, if the students get them early, then they're just early, and that's great. So this idea of open assessments really has the potential to be a lot like a YouTube video. You can, it exists somewhere, right? It exists on YouTube. It's on a server somewhere, but you can embed it anywhere. And so the idea of open assessments is essentially to do for assessments what's been done with videos and other things that you can embed. And that is to allow easy sharing of assessments and to allow them to be virtually anywhere. Just like you can put a YouTube video on your blog, you could also just drop an assessment in. So this is what openassessments.org looks like right now. Pop the question anywhere. It's kind of the tagline. And really, it's just about being able to create and embed assessments. Now, I won't bore you with a lot of the details, but essentially, it doesn't really have an authoring tool, because we just figured there are a million authoring tools out there anyway. And there's a standard called QTI, right? Question and test interoperability, or something like that. So you can use Blackboard or Canvas or whatever you use. You just keep using that, build your assessment, and then export it to QTI, and then you just pop it in here, and now you have an embeddable assessment. So basically, I think I already explained that. So this is what it looks like. So you just you load your assessment in. You have your little. You just put it somewhere on the web so that you can access it. You drop the little QTI web address, and then you just click View Assessment, and there it is. And so we have several assessments here that are already available. People can share their assessments because, again, it's formative. So, and by the way, once there are enough assessments, then you could even do potentially a summative assessment, right? Because if a student's going to study 2,500 questions, then maybe she should pass, right? I mean, I'm just suggesting that at some point they've done the work. The other thing, too, is it's not all multiple choice. So just to be clear, you can have short answers. You can have where they submit or they click, and then it says, here's an exemplary answer, and you can just compare what you wrote with your answer. This is formative, right? So the student can help themselves. So I'll just skip through this, but basically, and it can also support, the MathML and the math markup, so that you have all of the equations and all of that. So So what this has been used for, and this is the part that Brandon was going to talk about, but I'll just run right through it. MIT OpenCourseWare is a great resource. People love to go and use it as a jumping off point to develop curriculum and other things. But it's very hard to take the assessment. Well, now it's just as easy as embedding a YouTube video, and so this is why this openassessments.org was created. And just, again, quickly how it works. This looks a lot like what you would see if you were embedding a YouTube video, right? It's just, in this case, you're just embedding an assessment. So you're just passing the URL from the assessment into an embed code, and the website does it for you. The nice thing is you can have your assessment 10 different places, and all the data is coming into one place, right? Just like you can have a YouTube video 100 different places, blogs or whatever. You can still count how many times it's been viewed, right? Because it's just embedded. It still lives in one place. It's just being shown in lots of places. So I think my time is almost up, but so this is just looking into the future. So we're looking at opening item banks, having having a repository where people can share these, and extending the functionality so that eventually there will be an authoring tool. Everybody wants an authoring tool, but it works right now. So, and it was faster to build. So. So that's open assessments, and I think it not only can serve competency-based education, but I think it can serve anyone who wants to help students help themselves. Thank you.
If you have some, important question, Mark, okay? Kathy as well?
I'll speak up then. Competency-based assessments, I have quite a lot of experience with as a teacher about 20 years ago. It was mainly used for vocational education and training in the UK, and there was some very interesting developments around portfolio assessment. But I've seen it used in quite unhelpful ways in Thank you. I've seen competency-based assessment used in very unhelpful ways in school settings, which I suppose reinforces Graham's comment that the context and environment actually shape the way in which potentially very useful tools are used. So, for example, in New Zealand, I saw it used as a basis of weekly tests, pencil and paper test. The Scottish Qualifications Framework is based around competency-based education, and again, most schools will use paper and pencil tests that are set regularly and double marked by teachers and then moderated by the Scottish Qualifications Authority. And this would seem to me to be a very real danger with something that is about mastery, where effectively you are having to evidence that all learning has happened. I wondered if you had any views as to how we get around that.
That's a great question, especially in the context of the discussions that we've been having the last couple of days. I would answer that by saying it's competency-based education for me is about connecting your outcomes with your with your intentions and being very transparent about those things. And so it's true that it's a tool and it can be used, to administer an assessment every day, I suppose. I wouldn't agree with that as a pedagogic approach, but I would also say that in the most successful, as I've been helping institutions to implement and pilot and launch programs in competency-based education, the most successful ones are the ones where each course or each group of courses is tied to a performance assessment, not multiple choice. I think it's trying to tell me that we're done. So it's about being, it's about tying to performance. Yeah, it feels like some kind of a very fast samba. Yeah, exactly. So to answer your question, I think absolutely, it's a bit like the web. It can be taken as a tool in lots of different ways, but I think it's it's being intentional, being transparent, and ultimately, to my way of thinking, it's about pointing to a useful performance, not simply bubbling sheets, bubbling multiple choice questions, but I think that there's an opportunity to connect with students and say, this is where you're going with your course, and at the end of it, you're going to be able to build a very good business plan, and for example, and so that's the kind of performance that I think is meaningful and useful and interesting, and it can be done in English and many other, many of the liberal arts subjects as well.
And that was certainly my experience with vocational education.
Yeah. Thank you.
Would you please share the mic
Yes.
with Kathy?
I have two brief things. One is a comment and one is a question, which I know doesn't have a brief answer, but I'd like to put it out there. The comment is, when I was doing research on compulsory education, I looked at the archives of every state that still had archives that talked about competency-based, compulsory public education. Every single one, time was the biggest justification. How you train people to assembly line clock time. So with the invention of grades, with the invention of failure, time, regulating time, and wage labor, hourly wage labor, and school as time, subject matter as time, thinking in disciplines as time, how many weeks, how the regulation of the body as time, what age at which you went to school, being regulated, all was very much part of factory work. And so I think you're utterly right that if we can remove competency-based education from time, and what you described as a real perversion of competency-based learning, that helps us to get out of a paradigm of productivity and outcomes and focus on learning. But, two, I'm now in a situation where I have to worry about what I do on Monday morning for the largest national public school system in the U.S. On the higher education level, and everyone's worried about labor. 70% of the teaching force in colleges right now is adjunct or contingent labor. No security, no jobs, no anything. And the big worry about competency-based, and the issue I'll have to deal with on Monday morning, is how you can even make learning central in terms of competency-based education without putting teachers out of jobs, without putting more stresses on teachers who are facing the same kinds of stresses that K through 12 teachers are feeling too. How do you do that? How do you do that?
So I can only answer that with what I've seen, and I'll just give you a quick example from Western Governors University, and they are now 15 years into this experiment that really it was to begin with. 15 years, and now they have 50,000 students, 51 at this point. At Western Governors University, all faculty are full-time. I think that it's underreported that all faculty are full-time. They have benefits. It's a model that is extremely sustainable, and in fact, the faculty who, because it's a large enough project now, large enough institution, each of those is able to specialize. So you don't have to be the one that talks to the student, grades the test, and does 10 other things. If you love being with students, that's what you get to do all day. And believe it or not, there are people somewhere, somehow, that love grading tests. For me, it's hard to believe, but they exist. And so they can do that all day and provide rich feedback to students. When I say grading tests, I mean they're giving meaningful feedback. It's not a letter grade. It's helping them move towards mastery if they haven't reached it already. So this kind of what I've seen is that faculty are not out of jobs. Faculty are. It's ironic because they're adjuncting everywhere else. And it's moving even more into that direction. While at Western Governors University, they're all full time. So I would just say that the fact that they can do it for such a low cost and cover all the costs of all the textbooks in addition, and not having raised tuition in 7 years, there's something there. And so I think there's some efficiencies that we can find without firing teachers.
Would you come to my university and talk to us about this?
I'd love to. Absolutely. No, this is, I worked in Washington State, and I got 34 colleges to work together on curriculum. So there's something about getting people on board that's really important, and I think that's the biggest step. Because yes, there's fear of the unknown.
That's the biggest step.
Yeah. Okay. One last question. Do we? Okay. Very, very last.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you've worked with any states or any K-12 groups, but there are some states in the U.S. that are really doing a good bit of this work experimentation. Iowa particularly, some very unusual places where, and the stories are very compelling with the way that this type of assessment has given their students a voice and a way to succeed and really feel and learn by removing the time, by building the assessments that are not multiple choice but are performance-based. And so I would encourage you to, to work also with the secondary groups.
Just quickly, my first 7 years were as a high school computer science teacher, so I have a special place in my heart for K-12. Yeah, I think there are different issues there, and it gets a bit complicated very quickly. But this isn't a panacea. I'm just suggesting, and I hope that if you take anything from this, it's just that I think that there are some workable solutions, some things that are starting to work, and I hope that, my hope would be that you take some hope from this, and it's exciting, and I think there's good opportunities ahead for when we can find the right sort of blend of technology and really, person-to-person interaction, close mentoring interactions. We don't have to sacrifice everything on the altar of saving money. There are ways to save money, to be more efficient, and to teach better. Improve quality, yeah. Thank you.